What is up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's your girl JD here, back with another video, and I am finally getting to sit down and talk to you guys about House of the Dragon. So House of the Dragon, as you probably would already know if you're already invested or as invested as I am in this show, you would know that it is the spin-off of Game of Thrones. Basically, it's supposed to be the prequel of Game of Thrones. So it's technically supposed to be timeline-wise before we get to Game of Thrones. So whoever you see in this like House of Targaryen in this show, they're pretty much the ancestors of, Daenerys and all the others, from House of Targaryen in Game of Thrones. So if I'm going to be honest, I do feel like this show is single-handedly carrying the whole, I would say, Game of Thrones franchise. Even though I did think Game of Thrones was an excellent show, the ending, I think you might agree with me on this one, was absolutely terrible. We still talk about it years later. I think we're still mad about it. So I think that anger kind of crossed over to the producers and writers and all that for this show because they're making it up to us now. So yeah. So in this video, I'm primarily going to be focusing on season 2, but I am going to do a quick recap, or at least I'll try to make it as quick as possible, but it might end up being kind of like a half and half situation. I'll do my best to make it quick in terms of a recap for season 1. So I'm going to do a quick recap of season 1 first because I know I've never spoke about season 1 on this channel. So I'm going to try to squeeze that into this video, and also pretty much all the episodes that I have watched so far of season 2. We're gonna start with season 1. So Viserys Targaryen is in a little bit of trouble because he has no male heir. And when I say Viserys, I mean King Viserys. And only his daughter Rhaenyra, after her mother died in childbirth, is still living. All the other children end up passing away, or she ends up having issues even getting pregnant in the first place, unfortunately. And then also in her very last birth before she died, she ended up having a C-section that wasn't really wanted. Viserys just kind of made that decision, and they took the baby out. She died, and the baby ended up dying like a day later. So it was for nothing, pretty much. And I know the guilt was most definitely eating away at him. Regardless, he still has no male heir, and he's still trying to have a boy. So Otto Hightower, the king's hand, would swoop in, tell his daughter Alicent to go and comfort Viserys, but he knew what he was doing. He was honestly just using her for personal gain, but that's what he said to go do, so she did it. So Daemon actually wanted Otto's position, but because everyone thought he was so reckless, Viserys just kind of kept telling him no and pretty much sending him away. And even though Otto was only using him and not actually helping, and Daemon would also point this out, Viserys would still refuse to kind of admit it to himself. Now, their cousin Rhaenys comes in with her husband Lord Corlys to offer their daughter Laena as a bride, but Viserys is like, nah, I'm going to go with Alicent instead. They end up getting married, and Rhaenyra, of course, doesn't like that because that was like her best friend. That was her homie, and her dad was just like, I'm gonna take her as a bride now. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay. So yeah, Rhaenyra was not a fan of that combination. But they do end up having 2 sons together. This is Viserys and Alicent. They end up having 2 sons together, Aegon and Aemond. Now this comes after he already named Rhaenyra as his heir for the throne. And Laena eventually ends up getting married to Daemon instead, and they end up having 2 daughters by the name of Baela and Rhaena. But right before that, Daemon was actually having this weird incestual relationship with Rhaenyra, who is his niece. Yeah, and I think with Game of Thrones and also now House of the Dragon, we kind of notice a consistent theme. Like, there just always has to be some type of incest. Like, I just don't know what's going on there. I don't know in terms of the writer, like what that's about, but it's usually in there somewhere. But either way, Daemon doesn't actually end up going through with it. He kind of stops like midway. And then eventually Rhaenyra starts having this relationship with her and Strong, but also kind of entertains a marriage to Rhaenys and Lord Corlys's son Laenor, but he's more interested in men. So eventually Rhaenyra and Laenor just make a deal to kind of get married, but they both kind of do what they want to do inside the marriage. So Rhaenyra would end up having 3 sons with Herwin. That would be Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey. And I hate that she named him Joffrey, but technically it's supposed to be before Game of Thrones. But obviously if y'all watch Game of Thrones, y'all would understand why I hate the name Joffrey. But anyways, we're gonna move on. So people would eventually start questioning if these children were actually Laenor's kids. But we're not dumb. We clearly have eyes. Those are obviously Herwin's sons. Just saying. So around this time, Viserys also starts getting sick. It seems as though it might have started from a cut that he got from the throne. Since the throne is basically made out of iron swords, it's just like, okay, so who came up with this idea to just make a throne out of swords? I don't know. Anyways, but all of his and also Rhaenyra's children would end up growing up and training together at the castle, but it wasn't really a harmonious time. Let's just say that. They didn't really get along too well. Now back to Laena and Daemon. So Laena would end up having complications with her third pregnancy with Daemon, so she decided to just take herself out. And when I say out, I mean just... And she ends up asking her dragon Vhagar to incinerate her, which she does reluctantly, and it ends up being right in front of Daemon. So now Vhagar is without a rider, so Aemon takes it upon himself to just hop on and claim her, since he felt like his dad Viserys didn't really believe that he'd be able to get a dragon. So when Rhaenyra's sons see this, they start fighting with Aemon, and that's when Lucerys slashes at Aemon's eye, so now he's one-eyed Aemon pretty much. And Alicent, of course, wasn't having it and was demanding that Lucerys's eye be taken too, and Viserys is pretty much just looking at Alicent like, woman, please be quiet. That is clearly not going to be happening. So go sit down and calm yourself. That's pretty much what happened there. So after a few years, Viserys would now be on his deathbed, getting more and more delirious by the day. And on his final night, he ended up having Alicent by his side. And he's telling Alicent the story of this king from, like, I guess generations ago. And there's a lot of other people in the story also that have the exact same names as their son. So Alicent ends up claiming to everybody else, since she was the last person to kind of be there when he dies, she kind of claims that Viserys ended up saying that he changed his mind on Rhaenyra being the heir and ended up wanting Aegon to be king instead. But that's not really what really was being said. But really and truly, he was just telling this woman a story, but she took it how she wanted to take it, instead of just saying that she didn't really understand what he was talking about. So Alicent, let's be real with ourselves. You just wanted Aegon to be king. It's okay, honey. Let's just be real here. Now Rhaenyra is an outcast pretty much, because she still believes that she is the rightful heir, which she technically is. But Alicent and all of the rest of the delusional folk just start treating Aegon like the king, but they know good and darn well that he's just a puppet who doesn't actually know what he's doing. Around this time is when Rhaenyra and Daemon reunite, and they start their little weird relationship back up again. They get married after her previous husband Laenor basically fakes his own death. But when Lucerys, Rhaenyra's son, comes to deliver a message for his mom Rhaenyra, he leaves shortly after he delivers it, and Aemon decides to follow him with his dragon Vhagar. He claims that he was just trying to scare Lucerys because of the whole eye situation years earlier, but then his dragon Vhagar just decides, you know, I'm kind of done playing, and just pretty much kills Lucerys. So yeah, Aemon just looks really terrified, trying to figure out how he's gonna explain this one, but that's what he does. So that's pretty much where we leave off in season 1. So now we're gonna hop into season 2. So we start off with Rhaenyra, who's now gotten the news from a raven that her son Lucerys is now dead. She's in mourning, and she's trying to look for evidence that he's actually gone. But Daemon decides to take action instead of just mourning like Rhaenyra is, and he decides to hire these assassins that would go into King's Landing to pretty much kill King Aegon's son, which I forgot to say, at this point he had 2 children with his wife Helena, I think is her name, but they have 2 children, a boy and a girl. So the assassins go into the castle, but pretty much Daemon decided to make this decision on his own, because Rhaenyra, while she's in mourning, she just decided to disappear from, you know, all of her other duties. So while Aegon was out pretty much amusing himself, and Alicent was in her room having some smexy time with her Sir Kristen. It was kind of the perfect time for these assassins to come in and pretty much murder this little boy. So his wife Helena was there, and they held her at knife point. So she just kind of told them which child was the son, and as they killed this little boy, she just took her daughter and ran to Alicent's room. And I'm like, okay. I don't know if she was just in shock, but the way she reacted after seeing her son just being killed, it was like, huh, this is a very interesting reaction. But at the same time, it is a pretty shocking thing to witness. So yeah, I think she probably just was in shock. So now, based on their standards, Aegon has no heir. Even though he technically still has a daughter, you know, they only really look at male heirs, so he technically has no heir at the moment. But now he's trying to seek revenge because these assassins would sing like canaries when they get tortured, and they tell them all about Daemon's part in the plan to pretty much take out Aegon's son. But this would obviously cause a war if Aegon decided to just take it upon himself to react. So he has to be told that he can't really do much right now with regards to retaliation. They have to really think through their plan. But Rhaenyra then finds out shortly after that Daemon has something to do with all this, and now she decides to sneak into King's Landing in a little disguise so that she could talk with her old friend turned stepmother, Alicent. So she had wanted to talk to Alicent directly about what had happened with her son, Lucerys, and also Aegon's son, and also about what Alicent claimed that she heard from Viserys right before he died. And that's when Rhaenyra kind of realized that her dad didn't actually want her brother Aegon to be king over her being queen. He was just telling Alicent a story, which is a story that he's also told to Rhaenyra. That's how she knew that it was a story that he was telling. But of course, Alicent wasn't hearing any of it. She was just like, listen, I'm not a liar. Don't try to come at me like I am a liar. I am speaking truth, which she technically wasn't lying. However, it was like, girl, you made a mistake. Just own up to it and we can move on. We can figure this all out. So this is when they start having these little clashes here and there until they start pretty much escalating to full-on attacks. Now Rhaenyra is trying to figure out her strategy and is now trying to round up her dragons and some riders. But now things are starting to get out of hand over in King's Landing because these people are now starving. Aegon also isn't really doing a great job at being a leader, and things are just starting to get really chaotic. So Aemon keeps showing up, pretty much undermining Aegon at every turn because Aemon clearly makes the better strategist, and even their mother knows that because she kind of sits Aegon down and it's just like, do whatever they tell you to do. And it just seems so condescending, basically her saying like, listen, this is not your strength, okay? So just let them handle it because you clearly don't know what you're doing. That's pretty much what she was trying to say. So when Aegon tries to launch an attack and also kind of flies his dragon at the same time, that's when Aemon comes in with Vhagar, his dragon, and burns Aegon. And then Aegon and his dragon hit the ground and he's barely alive, but we don't really know that at the time until the very end of everything that's going on. So that's also when Rhaenys shows up with her dragon, Meleys, and they go toe-to-toe with Aemon and Vhagar until Vhagar just straight out bites down on Meleys's neck and she dies. So in turn, Rhaenys kind of accepts her fate as they pretty much plummet to the ground, and that's when she dies also. So shortly after, we find out that Aegon is still alive. They take him back to the castle to recuperate, but I think everyone kind of knows at this point that it's really only a matter of time before someone tries to kill him, especially since Aemon would literally do that to his own brother just for the throne. It's like, you already know from that, if he could do that to you, nobody could get in his way. And on top of that, it looks as though he's trying to threaten Aegon low-key into not saying anything about what happened and what he did to him. So it's looking pretty interesting for Aegon right now. But what I do find pretty interesting is that Aemon ends up being exactly what everyone thought Daemon was this whole time, and that he wanted to take the throne from Viserys when he really just wanted to help. But it was just the way he went about doing it that I think wasn't well thought through, and that's why people thought that he was just reckless. But it's just really fascinating to watch how Aemon is pretty much who everybody thought Daemon was, but Daemon wasn't actually that person. Aemon ended up being that person. You know what I mean? But it was kind of funny watching Alicent after she was the one standing up for her sons, trying to fight for their throne. But Aemon just turns around as soon as he gets his little bit of power and pretty much dismisses his mother. It's just like, yeah, you're not really needed anymore, so bye-bye, you know? It's like she's doing all this fighting for them just for Aemon to turn around and be like, yeah, you're not needed on this council anymore. I'm like, wow, that's an interesting way to show your appreciation, but cool. And then we also find out that she was actually pregnant for Sir Criston, and she was actually trying to get rid of it, but apparently she already had a son for him that her brother is now taking care of, that Criston may or may not know about. So from that, I just find it crazy that she has the audacity to talk about Rhaenyra, and who's the biological father of her sons, but at the same time she doing this. It's just like, girl, it's the hypocrisy for me. Just saying. But now that Rhaenys is dead, Rhaenyra now needed some more dragon riders. And she tries this one guy that was one of her soldiers, but Sea Smoke ends up not liking that too much. And yeah, he just kills him. So yeah. So after that whole situation, Sea Smoke, which is Laenor's old dragon, he ends up going out and hunts down Adam of Hull, who is the younger of two sons that Lord Corlys fathered with a woman outside of his marriage to Rhaenys. But before we get to the end, one more thing about that story, Rhaenys actually ended up finding out all about that before she died, and she didn't seem the least bit frazzled. Rhaenys, she just walks up to the older brother, puts her hand on his face, and it's just like, I bet your mom was just drop dead gorgeous. Like, who says that? Who really actually says that about a side piece? Like, really? I think that obviously just speaks on Rhaenys' character and how, like, she's just so confident in herself. Like, she doesn't let anybody move her off her square, okay? After Rhaenys' death and all that stuff with Sea Smoke, this is kind of pretty much where I leave off in terms of the episodes that I've watched, but I did see little snippets with regards to Rhaenyra meeting up with, I think, Adam. It looks as though it might go well. He seems pretty open in terms of calling and referring to her as queen. It's looking pretty interesting so far. But you guys can let me know how you've been feeling about these episodes with regards to season 2 specifically, but of course we could also go back in time a little bit and talk about season 1 as well. I'm not opposed to that. Let me know in the comments. But that is going to be it for now for me. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.